You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
وتكلم من هناك لشوارزنيجر
Va a pegarle Ronaldinho Gaucho. Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! 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 ¡Golazo!
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
Thank you, Grant. It's been a long week, but it's a short week, but it was a long week, which it always is after a holiday because you try and get back in the gear. But we thank Grant, as always, for Fridays, and we thank Grant for Jonathan Tannenwald, who joins us on the line along with Kevin Laramee, of course. Jonathan, I don't know if you got that inside Soccer Today joke or not, but
Grant Wall for I don't get it. I mean, I like the guy a lot, but still.
yes, we always thank Grant on TGIF. That's what it stands for. Thank Grant. Yeah. There you go. Jonathan, we had Jonathan on to talk about the Philadelphia Union primarily because that is where Jonathan is based, of course, in the club that he would probably have followed the closest over the past few years. They're obviously not having a great start to the season. Is there any simple way to describe what's happening there right now, or is this just a collection of problems that is manifesting itself in just this poor start?
Yes, I think there is a very simple way to explain, and that is the players aren't good enough. I just don't think they have the talent to be competitive in Major League Soccer at a high level. And there are ways that you can make up for that with scouting and development and coaching. The coaching aspect of it, a lot of people here sort of, as a carnal instinct, want Jim Curtin fired. And I think there are some mistakes that Jim Curtin has made. But coaching improves or deteriorates the quality of talent for the most part at margins. The margins at play here are not enough to overcome the discrepancies in talent that the Union have gone up against.
And we did see a decent season last year. Would you say that that was a mirage then?
No, I think Tranquilo Barnetta was an important player. And Vincent Nogueira obviously was an important player too. Those two guys were the backbone of the success that they had early in the season. I think Alejandro Bedoya is a pretty good number 8. I think Roland Alberg can play the number 10. But he, as Taylor Twellman noted on the TV broadcast of the Union New York City FC game, he reported to training camp 17 pounds overweight. And I've heard things, and others have reported, that they've heard the same. He ain't that great in practice. And Jim Curtin is the kind of coach who's going to dish out playing time in a game based on how players do during the week. And you can say, well, shouldn't you put your most talented players on the field? Sure. And if they're not going to get on the field, what can they do? Well, on the flip side, if you're busting your rear end in practice and doing all the right things, and then you can't get on the field, what message does that send? When the guy who was getting the playing time is lounging it during the week, as I've heard that a few players on the Union are, Alberg less so than he used to, but he's not alone. And let me be this clear also. Alejandro Bedoya is not one of those players. He's doing just fine. He's just been played out of position.
In the offseason, you mentioned Barnetta, and during the last season, Vincent Nogueira's departure as well. And I think you can pinpoint Philly's success, lack of success, and struggle with those presence and those players on form. Brings us to this season, in the offseason, the big signing of Onyewu, and hasn't worked out so far in 2017. How can you make that signing work out? Because that's the principle of having a DP or TAM players is signing them is well and good, but you have to find a way to get them to be effective in your roster. How do you answer that question?
There's one way to do it. It's very simple. If you're Jay Simpson, who was signed with targeted allocation money, and that is score goals. He scored 1 goal this year, and he has not sufficiently displaced CJ Sapong from the top of the depth chart as he was supposed to do. That hasn't happened. And that's not the coach's fault, I don't think. That's the player's fault or the general manager's fault for signing a player who wasn't good enough because they could get him on the cheap. And that goes down on Ernie Stewart as a mark against him. A number of his international signings have not panned out, which is very disappointing for a guy who was a really good player personnel executive in the Netherlands, and obviously one of the great U.S. national team players of all time with a sterling reputation in a lot of ways. It's been tarnished a little bit here. But if you look at around Major League Soccer, the position that is really hammering the Union the most is at striker. And it has bedeviled them for almost their entire history. And I don't think it's a coincidence that their unwillingness to spend significant money on a really quality striker coincides with, and it's coming at the same time as, the fact that they aren't that good, because they aren't that good. So look around the league. I put up this chart a week ago today before the NYCFC game here, which obviously New York is the great example with David Villa, who is a star making $5.6 million and scoring a lot of goals. Look up and down the Eastern Conference. Ola Kamara and Kyle Larin are sort of at the cheaper end of the scale. Larin obviously is the exception to every rule in a lot of ways. Joseph Martinez was a $4.8 million transfer fee. We don't know how much money he's making yet. Hector Villalba was a $2.75 million transfer fee. Nemanja Nikolic is making somewhere over $1 million, I believe, and the Fire paid a $3 million transfer fee for him, and he's lighting it up. He is the example of when you go out and get a foreign striker right. Bradley Wright Phillips is over $1 million at this point, I believe. The Union believed that Jay Simpson could be the next Bradley Wright Phillips. He is not, for reasons that I'll get into in a minute. Josie Altidore and Sebastian Javinko we know about. Mateo Mancosu we know about. I'd imagine he's going to make more this year, Kevin, than the $189,000 he made last year.
Yes, it should be, especially now that he is he has been transferred officially from Montreal. So yeah.
And then you get to the Union. CJ Sapong is making $225,000, and he is their top striker. It's not enough. It's not good enough. The talent that you have to be able to go get now in Major League Soccer to be competitive, the Union don't have it. The only two guys they have who are at that level right now, I think, are Harris Medunjanin and Alejandro Bedoya. Bedoya is playing better now that he's in a deeper spot. Problem is, he's still getting used to playing with Medunjanin because Medunjanin is not a pure disruptor. He's a deep-lying playmaker of a guy who's sort of a Michael Bradley-esque, going to sit there and hit some really great passes, which he has done to guys like Sapong, who then haven't done a thing with him, and in fact have botched some chances that a better player would have scored on.
You mentioned CJ Sapong a few times, and CJ Sapong, for no disrespect here, but for lack of a better option, is the starting striker for the Philadelphia Union. Is there an over-reliance on CJ Sapong right now where you actually need secondary, third scoring as well
that's part of it, yes.
And somebody to take over. Like you mentioned, the signing didn't pan out once again, but it seems like in MLS, he's on the wrong side of Father Time's relationship with himself. CJ Sapong is at
he's a big boy, though. That's his biggest. That's what the advantage that he has over Jay Simpson is that he's a much more physical player. He's a big load to deal with, and Simpson is not. And they're different kinds of players, and the style the Union play, you need a big guy up there, and Simpson is not really that. And again, it reflects poorly on Ernie Stewart, the GM, and on Jay Sugarman, the owner, who is the one who was really unwilling to spend the money to go and get, for example, an Aaron Johansson or a Terrence Boyd, who are sort of the reserve, the backup U.S. national team strikers of the foreign contingent who are not successful with their clubs. Could you lure them into Major League Soccer if the money was right and the circumstances were right? I think you could. The Union have a lot of the circumstances right now, but they aren't spending the money.
Jonathan, I want to go back to Jay Simpson for a little bit here. What do you think made them believe that a guy whose strongest career performance was for a club like Leyton Orient could come in and be an MLS dominant striker?
I do not know, frankly. They obviously have a scouting network that told them that they thought this guy could pull it off. I don't know who all the people were along that line.
That's and you touched on it a minute ago, just in terms of reflecting on the international signings. I mean, again, this is a very difficult question to answer without being on the inside, but overall, is your perception maybe that it's a lack of, skill on the scouting side, a lack of money on the scouting side, a lack of efforts?
I think it's a lack of money. It shouldn't be a lack of skill given Ernie Stewart's track record. But the guys who he's brought in haven't really done the job. And I'll give you what might be the best example out of the Western Conference is, and I really like all the guys in Houston. I think their moves to sign some of the top attacking players in CONCACAF have been very smart. But the guy who I can't get out of my, two guys I can't get out of my mind, Skells Ngashi in Colorado, who has by and large done the job for them and is, over $1.5 million in salary. That ain't cheap. That's the kind of player you'd think that if the Union had some money, they could have gone and gotten. And I'll give you the other one, and this won't surprise you, because it's a team, Duane, that you've talked about many times on this show. It's the Vancouver Whitecaps going out and opening the checkbook to get Freddie Montero.
Mm-hmm.
And he's put the ball in the net for them. Well, that's what you need. That's the position, that and the playmaking midfielder. But you can get a playmaker out of South or Central America for a little less if you want to. But striker's the position where you got to spend the money.
Absolutely. Jonathan, at the end of the last game, we did see, some pretty serious booing, some pretty serious sort of disconnect. So, you said it's Philadelphia, and we can make all kinds of jokes about Santa Claus and snowballs, and I'm sure that people in Philadelphia are sick of those jokes altogether. But
well, you know what the story behind that is, right?
I've heard it before. Yeah, as a Dallas Cowboys fan, I remember the other one.
I liked you for all this time.
It's sometimes you can't help who you are. You should try being a Washington Capitals fan in Toronto. But at any rate,
I was going to say something about that, but it's not a hockey show yet. So
yeah, there you go. Just in terms of the Sons of Ben and those guys, is there any danger of them completely losing faith? I know we saw it here in Toronto a little bit during the bad years
already. I mean, look, I hear often from fans who say I'm not going to games anymore. And as happened in Toronto when they made their run last year, they'll all be right back in the stands when they get good. There's no doubt in my mind about that. And if they're not, then somebody will come along and buy their tickets and they won't be able to get back in. That happens. That happens in every sport. The booing is merited. Players and the coaches said the booing is merited. They aren't good enough. The question is, how do you fix that? And I don't think firing the coach is enough, because it's going to mask the deeper problems that they have. And some new coach is going to come in, win 2 or 3 games, be hailed as a savior, and then go back to the team's still going to be what it is. And then if you go out and, for example, try to get Bob Bradley to replace Jim Curtin, if you do that, the amount of money it's going to take to bring Bradley to Philadelphia, why would you not spend that on players and see if Jim Curtin can actually coach him?
When you were saying, Jonathan, that firing the coach is not enough, I had a flashback of a few years ago when you and I had the same type of discussion about the Philly Union and with the former regime before this one that is present. So you mentioned getting better players. Is there a way in the player handling, in the network of contacts, in just how it all comes together in Philadelphia that has been wrong? And you mentioned, we talk about the symptoms, but the cause of the problem, we've seen different iteration of front offices, of benches, of coaches, of players. Why is Philadelphia not able to get back to a level they were earlier on in their history in the last few years?
Only there very briefly.
Yeah, exactly. It was a flash in the pan.
But look, they've had 3 head coaches, 4 player personnel executives in charge in various ways. The results haven't changed all that much. The constant's been the owner. And they need more They've invested a lot in the academy, which is great. They've invested a lot in the training facility, which is good. They haven't put the money into the senior team yet, and they need to put the money into the senior team. And if they don't have the money to put it into the senior team and the academy, then they got to go get more money. And that's not happening right now, as far as I can tell. The academy has produced some good players. Derek Jones is a very good player. Austin Trusty has the potential to be a very good player. And there's a wave of guys who are 16, 17, 18, who we might see in the USL this year, already are a little bit, and will eventually be on the senior team. Problem is, they're all midfielders and defenders. I don't see a top striker coming out of the academy right now. If they did, we'd know about it. And again, that's where you might have to go and open up the checkbook, and they aren't doing that.
The one word that we've been hearing since we started the show is money, because, well, now in Major League Soccer 3.0, quote unquote, we're wondering what to call it. Let's call it the cash era, because, well, teams like Atlanta United come in the league with a lot of cash, and we've seen results. What do you think?
I have no problem with it. I have no problem with it at all. It's a sign of how much the league has improved, that there are better players in the league, and that there's more money being spent on players in the league. And that the owners, instead of putting the money in their pockets, are spending it on the players. Because the players run the show. In terms of drawing eyeballs and television viewers and selling tickets and jerseys and all that stuff. It's the players' game. It's funny, I think about the impact that the coach has had on the Union. Because I bashed Jurgen Klinsmann incessantly for having too much of an impact on the U.S. team. And here I am, knowing that it's a player's game in the case of the Union, as Jim Curtin keeps saying. It's a player's game, which is what Jurgen Klinsmann always said. It's a player's game. He can only do so much. Well, it was clear that the things that he was doing were affecting the team negatively on and off the field, and so he had to go. And the results weren't there. But so why would I not hold Jim Curtin to the same standard? Because in the case of Jurgen Klinsmann, he had the talent to do the things that the U.S. national team could do and even take it a step farther. He had the talent. The Union don't. And I would ask you this, by the way, Kevin. Had Montreal lost to Atlanta, or even drawn with Atlanta last weekend, and now you'd be coming into the winless team derby at the weekend, would anybody be calling for Mauro Biello? Has his head? I don't think so.
I don't think so either, just because of the growth that we have seen in certain players, and there seems to be a constant development, and there's been some better handling of tactics and good results after bad results. So again, like you, I wouldn't be worried for Mauro Biello's head. But here, let me just follow up with this. I've been saying that I'm worried that Jim Curtin will be the next head coach to lose his job. Is it going to happen if Philly loses to Montreal on Saturday?
And I'd say one more thing about Montreal, by the way. They also know they have Zemaili coming in soon. It was going to be a big boost. Yeah. And the Impact have a proven track record of going out and spending good amounts of money on foreign talent. I don't think Jim Curtin is going to get fired if the Union lose on Saturday. And the reason why I don't think so is that Ernie Stewart has again and again and again very publicly and very vocally backed Jim Curtin's work. And if he flips all of a sudden, because the players aren't quitting on it, that's for sure. If that message was getting out, we'd know. If Stewart flips and fires the guy after backing him again and again and again, the spotlight's going to turn on Stewart. And I had a bunch of other people who say, you've been saying all of these nice things about him. Why have you now turned on a dime and fired the guy? It hasn't been backing in the sort of, the English quote unquote vote of confidence that actually means you're getting fired in 2 games sort of thing. It's been legitimate, and it's been again. It was last year, and it's this year, and it's happened again and again and again. So it would fall on Ernie Stewart if that news comes down, and it's on him now. And then you'd say, well, who would be the interim coach? Well, the interim coach would probably be Mike Sorber, who was involved in trying to turn Aaron Wheeler into a center back with disastrous results under John Hackworth, which from what I've heard is part of why he got passed over for the head gig and it went to Jim Curtin. So then they're going to have to go out and find somebody from somewhere. Is it going to be a foreign coach who's then going to have to adapt to the quirks and strange ways of MLS with Chris Albright as his rules guy? And Albright, I think, is the weak link in the front office, and I have for a while. and a lot of people have. They got to be real careful if they pull this trigger and where they go next.
Yeah, no doubt. It's always sort of a fool's errand to think that you're going to fire the coach and everything's going to change. Although, if I had to put a wager down and I was looking for some good value in the wager of the next MLS coach fired, I might look in my backyard if Toronto's struggles to get wins continue much longer, because the ambition obviously is very high and they have the money to go after a bigger name if that were to happen. So, something to think about there. But that's
I'll say one quick thing about that. The guy who should be on the hot seat is Jay Heaps. We know it's never going to happen because the Crafts won't do it.
Sure.
And the other thing about firing Jim Curtin, everybody says, well, the Sounders fired Ziggy Schmid and it turned their whole season around. Well, A, they got Nicolas Ladero, and B, they had on their bench a guy in Brian Schmetzer who had the coaching chops, and everybody knew it.
Yeah.
So they were not turning to some unknown entity or lesser entity as the interim coach. They were turning to a guy with a really good coaching acumen. Union don't have that in their stable right now.
Exactly. It's yeah, exactly. All right, Jonathan, just a couple quick ones before we say goodbye that aren't necessarily Union related. Toronto playing Chicago tonight. I mentioned the TFC, but I want to look at Chicago for a second and the Schweinsteiger edition. I was pleasantly surprised by the effort and the impact that he's had so far. Were you surprised by him coming in and playing as well as he did?
I have been. I've been very impressed. And I when you come in and say you want to do this and you want to work hard and compete, a lot of times it's just words, as we know. But Schweinsteiger has proven that he really does want it, and he's got, he's still got some stuff left in the tank at 32. And Veljko Paunovic has put him in a smart position tactically where he's been able to succeed. But again, I mentioned this name earlier. I'm going to mention it again. Nemanja Nikolic is such a big part of this. I'm on the stats page on MLS Soccer right now. I should have done my homework about this. How many goals he's scored so far? But he's been scoring, and he's all the stuff that Schweinsteiger and the other guys in the field have created. Nikolic has finished. It's 4 goals so far this year in 6 games, which is a plenty healthy return, I would say. And that's where, when the Union have guys, Harris Medunjanin, going into the game in New York last weekend, was leading Major League Soccer in chances created. Quality scoring chances created. Ain't his fault if he's passing the ball to somebody else for it to be finished and it's not getting finished.
Mm-hmm. All right, Jonathan, let's turn the tables completely on this. The UEFA Women's Champions League semifinals go this weekend, and we're going to talk a little bit, Kevin and I, later on in the show about this. But specifically, there are some streaming options to watch it in the United States. And this is kind of a broad question that I'm going to ask you. Do you think that it's a chicken and egg question? Do you think enough is done to get women's football on TV in front of eyeballs out to the masses, or is there just not the numbers to warrant it? Obviously, what I'm
going down that rabbit hole, don't you?
Yeah, I do. But that's what.
All right, you ready?
Yeah.
There is.
Okay.
Unfortunately, the dominant platform at the moment is one that had some technical issues last weekend. And that platform is the Verizon, which is, I guess, the equivalent of your Bell, has as one of its subsidiary businesses a content streaming platform that it runs, which paid the National Women's Soccer League a rights fee for the exclusive distribution rights within the United States to the NWSL games that were not on the national TV package. It had some struggles last week because it either doesn't have a lot of bandwidth when it's getting hit with a lot of requests for content, or something, because the picture quality was really bad, and it kept cutting out, and it automatically inserted commercials a few times when it wasn't supposed to. You guys in Canada have no such problem because you can just, the international distribution of NWSL games is on the league's website free of charge, and it works so well, in fact, that some people in the U.S. were using a VPN to Canada to watch through the league's website where the picture quality was better, which indicts a great many things. And I said my piece about that sort of in the story that I wrote on the rights fee deal, because part of it is that Verizon has deals with the entity now known as AOL. Back when we were in high school, we called it America Online, and it was where we did all of our web browsing.
You got mail.
And also, nominally, they can get game streams. They've said they are going to at some point get the game streams onto Yahoo Sports' website. Well, the sooner they do that, the better, i.e. today or tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And it ain't happening yet, and that would solve a lot of the problems, because you can only watch these streams through their mobile and tablet apps right now, not even on the platform's desktop website, which they also say they're going to resolve. And a lot of people are a little skeptical of that because, they take their time on these things unless there's a lot of public pressure. And, each of us who streams individually is one person, not 1,000 people. Now,
Sure.
about the Women's Champions League. Is enough being done? Yes. Well, I should say that. No, yes and no. No, in that it would be great if there was some kind of broadcast distribution package that UEFA could offer to the rights holders of the Men's Champions League, which would have a solid streaming platform, as Fox does, and say, here, you can have it. And I know enough to know that Fox would take it.
Yeah,
But the rights, I gather that the rights for UEFA Women's Champions League games are sold by the individual clubs and not by UEFA. There's no big package deal. Fix that and you solve a lot of problems. In the moment, the Barcelona-Paris Saint-Germain series is going to be on beIN Sports' streaming platforms, which I suspect means you guys will get it too up there. And it should come as no surprise to us because of being Qatari and their connections to Barcelona and PSG respectively. That's no surprise.
Mm-hmm.
The Manchester City-Lyon series will be on ESPN's streaming platform. And the reason why it will be on ESPN's streaming platform is because Carly Lloyd plays for Manchester City and Alex Morgan plays for Lyon. I know that Khadijah Buchanan also plays for Lyon, but in terms of down here, Alex Morgan plays for Lyon. Sorry.
Sure.
Which means that there is a reason for the American viewing public to be interested beyond simply the game's existence. And I think we can safely say that there are more people interested in Carly Lloyd and Alex Morgan than there are in the UEFA Women's Champions League. That's life.
Sure.
So it is natural that there will be interest as a starting point to bring more UEFA Women's Champions League to the games of the U.S. audience. As a starting point, carry the ones that the U.S. players are in. And then let's see what happens from there. That is perfectly natural and perfectly fine. Now, we were talking off air before the show about the fact that the games are, as far as you guys know, not going to be distributed in Canada. It probably would be nice if they would, given Khadijah Buchanan's potential involvement.
Mm-hmm.
And what Ashley Lawrence is at PSG, right?
Yeah.
So you might get that one. You might want to take a look. I'm not sure. You guys would know better than I would. But I have had my say on this show many times over the years about my belief that TSN can do much more with the TSN Go streaming platform than it does.
There's no doubt.
So for those who were not listening to the show back in the day, I'll say it very simply. TSN can do much more with the TSN Go streaming platform than it does. I have a hard time believing Bell doesn't have the money and the smarts to do it.
Exactly. Yeah. Quickly, John, 1 minute. 10 years from now, if we flash forward, this is kind of a general question again. It's not about TV. What's going to be the bigger women's league, the NWSL or the UEFA Champions League, sort of the European leagues? What do you think is going to be bigger in 10 years?
I hope it is still the NWSL. Could it be the Bundesliga? Yeah. The thing about the women's leagues in Europe is that there are 2 or 3 really good teams in each one, and the rest are awful.
Mm-hmm.
The only one where I'll use parity, because whether you believe that parity or competitive balance is the one that's enforced from on high. But the point being that there are more good teams in the English league right now. There's more depth of talent of good teams in the English league than in the other European leagues. And as the English teams invest more, hopefully that will continue to improve. Obviously, it is in glaring red lights right now that Manchester United doesn't have a women's team. Same with Real Madrid in Spain. And it is good to hear that they are taking a lot of criticism over it. But I suspect that we will still see the NWSL be the dominant league because it is going to be the league where the American players want to play. Doesn't mean they will all the time, but they want to play in it. And they want the American players, believe it or not, still want the U.S. women's national team to be the dominant team on the planet and America to be the best women's soccer nation on the planet. That might be hearsay, you know. That might be scandalous, you know. But I think it's true.
I suspect it is true, Jonathan. Okay. On that note, we will say goodbye. I'll let you get
one more thing really quickly.
Sure, you go ahead.
I've been in a really miserable mood the last 2 weeks, Duane, as have you. And Kevin, you. And one of these days we will do a hockey show and just scream at each other for half an hour. It'll be really good radio.
Yeah, but you guys agree on that side. So that's where I'm like, I'll be alone in my corner.
Yeah, but your establishment, I would imagine, has been making fairly good money lately, has it not?
Oh, pretty much. It always does.
Well, I watched the game last night. It was quite a nuisance.
Yeah.
It was a slow game last night. I'm not looking forward to tonight. I'm going to probably be on my phone in the stadium. I'm not going to lie, but we'll see how this one works.
I'm going to try to be out to dinner if I can. News while we're on the air.
Yes.
Your boy.
Yeah. I know. We're getting there. Yeah.
We're getting there after the break.
Fully waived by Toronto FC. Too bad for him. Too bad for the hype train driver. Oh, I'm sorry, Duane. I didn't mean to.
That's okay.
But
such is life. And I suspect that what you'll see, I'll touch on this after the break real quickly, but I suspect that Mo Babuli, like Quinlan Roberts, will probably end up in League One Ontario, which is my other hype train, which I do have a professional relationship with, I should always point out. But nonetheless, I suspect he might end up in there, keeping himself in shape for the Canadian Premier League. And if you didn't hear on Wednesday, Paul Byrne once again said that it's coming, and we got that from the horse's mouth. So there you go.
I have not had time to listen to that show yet, but I will. Riddle me this, Duane. Will Mo Babuli score a goal at some point that knocks Toronto FC out of the Voyageurs Cup?
Oh, yeah, that has to happen. That'll be the new bingo card.
There you go. All right. Maybe. I'm looking forward to the first Canadian Premier League v MLS battle in the years ahead. I want it to be a Toronto derby, but so far we haven't really heard confirmation of that. All right, Jonathan, we'll talk again soon. As always, thanks for your time, and try and enjoy the game tonight.
I will try, yes.
Okay.
You're listening to Soccer Today on SPN Radio. You can find the on-demand version of this very show on iTunes, Stitcher, Feedburner, Podbay Player, Podbean, anywhere you get your podcasts under the Sports Podcasting Network feed. Subscribe to our YouTube page to make sure you never miss a live show talking about soccer today, the MLS postgame show, open lines after dark, 5 rings daily during the Olympics. Make sure you subscribe and give us a follow on Twitter at SportsPodNet and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network.
Welcome back. That's Kevin. That's just take a moment to just reflect.
I'm sorry, Duane. All my condolences to the fan in you. The little part of a fan in you that was still alive might have died a few minutes ago.
Yeah, and look, he wasn't going to play this year. He wasn't even making the bench. Raheem Edwards came in and has sort of taken if you look at my pinned tweet right now, it talks about my first reference to Raheem Edwards now, because I like to point out that I that I find these prospects a little earlier than most, simply because I'm able to watch the games. And if you go out to games in the Toronto area to watch, or Ottawa, there's a team now, and you can watch teams in London, Windsor, League One Ontario I'm talking about. You can see these guys firsthand up in, and I think it shows the value of the league. Now, Mo didn't work out. He was a bit of a later prospect. He probably found his level. He's a guy that probably could find a good run out in USL. Maybe the Fury might want to take a look at him. That I think would be worthwhile. But certainly with the Canadian Premier League coming quickly, I can't come quick enough for guys like that, and guys like Quinlan Roberts, who, as I did mention it to Jonathan, but for those that haven't heard, he signed with the Woodbridge Strikers, which is one of the top teams in League One Ontario last week. So he will be playing he'll be the keeper for the Woodbridge Strikers, which just shows you the quality of the league continues to grow. Its season kicks off next Saturday. So get out there, support local football, guys. It's the future, and you get to see guys like Raheem Edwards and Mo Babuli years before others do.
Yeah, the margin is very small, though, right? You either make the MLS roster or the 11, 18, 23, or you don't. And sometimes, well, we'll see in the next few days. There is a trend now as well that it happened with Louis Belangarette a few years ago, where he was taken off the Montreal Impact rosters, having made his pro debut, and just signed back to a USL contract. And maybe we'll see Mo Babuli appear somewhere in the USL and ASL. There is a lot of opportunities for players now, and not enough for Canadian players with the lack of the Canadian Premier League, but with the presence of many USL and ASL teams that are struggling right now, that are looking for players. It's still that time of year where rosters are in a ebb and flow in the second division. So maybe Mo Babuli can find a place to play at the second division before maybe making a move to the third division. And it is, though, like I was going to say, a small margin of you make it or you don't. Jackson Emil, days before, there was a rumor that he might be leaving the Montreal Impact and not happy with the playing opportunity. And it's hard to make arguments that you should be in the lineup when you don't really have a chance to make those arguments, because you need to be in the lineup to make those arguments, right? But with this small playing chance, that might have turned around, and we'll see if he gets another boost of confidence and maybe playing time. He scored a goal twice in Major League Soccer. It happened in a similar fashion last year. So we'll see if for a player like him, because those are similar with not being same example. Anthony Jackson has been with the Montreal Impact Academy for a few years, playing the USL's pro for a few years now too, and never really got that opportunity. So his goal might have changed his fortune. For Mo Babuli, that chance did come at a few spurts last year because of injuries, but this year, you were mentioning, he was not going to play. And for players at that level, at that category of development still, because you're always developing, you need playing time. And maybe for his career, it's a blessing in disguise, because he might be getting more playing time at another place. And I'm looking at teams like maybe San Francisco Deltas, the Canadian men's national team, home away from home now in San Francisco. You never know what opportunity can be knocking when you just got released. So if you're listening, there's very few chances. But if you are, don't be too down on yourself. Sometimes when you've lived this your entire career, a door shuts down. In this day and age, hopefully others is open.
Yeah, look, it's a great story that he even got into an MLS game based on how he got there. We told that before. Basically, he was playing in unsanctioned ethnic leagues just 2 years before he was playing in Major League Soccer. That's a great story, regardless of the fact that it doesn't have the Hollywood ending, so to speak. It still is a great story. Kevin, let's move on a little bit, completely jumping to 180 degrees, as we often do on this show. Let's go talk about the Champions League draw for the semifinals. We did, in fact, get that All Madrid. There won't be an All Madrid final, because there's going to be an All Madrid semifinal. Atletico and Real Madrid, of course, drawing each other, which means that Monaco will play Juve in the other semi.
You know what that means? You know what that means? That Juve is going to the final.
Yeah, it seems that way. Although Monaco should not be discounted by
True.
any means, and having basically ran roughshod over two teams that would have been much more favored than them in the knockout round by playing a very exciting offensive brand of football that has been a remarkable. They've been a breath of fresh air. Like, they eliminated City, so obviously my partisanship I'm putting aside here. I can recognize that they have been immensely entertaining in this knockout stage and earlier on. I didn't watch them as much in the group stage, to be honest, but certainly since then they have been very fun to watch. They're particularly good at home. If you look at their home record and their home goal differential, it's outstanding. So I wouldn't completely discount the possibility of a major upset here. But if you read most of the review of the draw so far, and sort of people are coming around to this idea that I think we first talked about on this show back in December, that Juve is the sleeping giant in this. It's been over 20 years since they last won a European championship. They're overdue. Great club like that, putting all their eggs big. They have Serie A wrapped up at this point, so all their eggs are going straight towards this. This seems like their best opportunity in a long, long time.
Yeah,
you look at the Real Madrid's they haven't kept a clean sheet at home in the entire Champions League stages so far. That's telling. You get Juve in there, they're going to be able to do that. They shut Barcelona down. Atletico Madrid, I think that would be a very sort of rock v rock kind of battle in the final if they were to meet. But certainly, you look at Juventus and you look at Atletico, and Griezmann aside, I think that the top end offensive talent on Juve is just more capable, and the defensive abilities and intensity could be matched if those two were a matchup. So what I'm getting at here is Juve, to me, in these final four, and I'm probably being guilty of dismissing Real Madrid, like we talked about the other day when I say this, but
Real Madrid fatigue. Yeah, it's so easy to dismiss them. Yeah.
Yeah, it's boring to pick them. So Juve, they're kind of even like they're not the most popular club, and they are very popular, but they're unpopular for the same reason they're popular, if you know what I mean. A lot of people have fatigue about Juve, but in this Champions League, I think a lot of people are kind of adopting them now because of the way that they've been able to just so professionally and effectively play out the fixtures so far. So to me, they're the favorite right now.
And not just that, Wayne, you mentioned how the defensive mentality, Catenaccio, Italy's way to bunker down, it could be boring, but the way Juve does it, I don't find it boring. I see streaks of Higuain, Dybala get on the ball, execute exceptional skills, getting themselves chances without the support of 11 guys up front. Sometimes they're left on an island and they find themselves creating chances 2v4, 2v5, but still finding ways to be effective and not making the balance of the team skewed on the offensive side. They're keeping their shape, being organized. And I really like how Juve is playing. It's a blueprint of how tactics can support great skills, great talent, great athleticism when it's used the right way, when you put the right pieces at the right place. For me, Juve is fascinating to watch for all those reasons. And I don't mind if it finishes 0-0 when Juve is part of it with this roster, because it's interesting, and you got stories galore for us pundits. We like to talk about stories often, and Buffon, the vampire keeper, and Mandzukic and Samir Khedira's resurgence, and you have a lot of great stories individually, but that team as a whole, it plays as a team, and it's fun to see that aspect too.
Yeah, certainly. I've enjoyed watching them in this Champions League, and that's not something I've said often before. It's like, let's use the Italian analogies even further. It's kind of like a fine red wine that maybe it gets a little better with age, and that's a team that really is starting to grow on a lot of people, even though they sort of have that massive amount of success, which makes them unpopular in some people's minds. And that sort of Real Madrid, Manchester United, all those teams that have had massive success often get pushback and hate along the way, and Juve is the same way.
In the same vein, though, yes, Juve does go out and buy some pieces, but then they turn out great players. They got Pogba, but they brought Pogba to a new level. Enough that Manchester United wanted to buy him back. Dybala, maybe the heir apparent to Messi in Argentinian football. He breaks out with Juve, right? So Juve, in a way, keeps their identity of how they build their roster, keeps their quote-unquote street cred with their supporters culture by developing great player, having an Italian contingent, having a great legends in their own way, and being true to themselves and not forgetting how they got to be this type of team, using that to build a roster. Yes, getting some foreign talents. Yes, getting some young foreign talent that you buy at 15, but that you mold into a professional for their later years, and some great players like Higuain that you go buy off direct opponents like Napoli, not just because you want to get that player, but because you don't want that player to play for that team. So you do have that aspect of the quote unquote the Bayern Munich aspect, but in a very smaller scale, and it's still true to the identity of how Juve is playing and managing the roster and their club.
Fair enough. All right, quickly in the 1 minute left we have in this segment, what are you looking forward to this weekend in MLS action? Any particular game that jumps out at you?
Well, of course, there's the Eastern Conference Cave Derby tomorrow between Montreal and Philly. I think it's the chance to put a nail in the coffin of Philadelphia. If Montreal wins, Montreal got 9, and Philly looking at a great gap between themselves and the 10th spot already after just a few month and a half in the season. For Montreal, it's their chance to string a few wins together to make their slow start due to a lot of draws a history of the past. So I do like this game coming up tomorrow. I think it's important for Montreal fans, for Montreal Impact to show that they're a top, like a higher table conference, Eastern Conference team, and not a mid-table one. Well, they might be mid-table, but I mean they're not bottom. Like they should be above that red line or close to it. And a win will do that for Montreal. If it's a loss against Philly, then it raises a lot of question. But I do feel Montreal's got the advantage here.
All right. I'm curious to see how many people are in the stadium tonight at BMO Field, based on the conflict with the Leafs-Caps game. So that's going to be interesting to see there. Schweinsteiger's Canadian debut in a competitive game. That's something to talk about. But to me, the best games of the weekend are going to be the 2 FA Cup semifinals. To take it off MLS for a second, particularly the Spurs-Chelsea one, with the recent developments in that title race closing up. It's not a league game, which probably would have made it even more intense with the point differential. But certainly, it's going to be an interesting little tease in terms of what the rest of the stretch run might look like with those two teams coming up. And in terms of Arsenal City on Sunday, you've got two teams that are going to be pretty desperate. That's really both those teams have left to play for that's significant other than top 4. I think even in Arsenal's case, it legitimately is the only thing left to play for that is significant, because I don't think top 4 is in the cards for them. So that's what I'm looking for, Kevin. All right, let's take a quick break. We'll come back with some bits and bites to wrap up the week.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
The bits and bites on Soccer Today.
Welcome back. Kevin, we sort of touched on this with Jonathan. We'll do a couple women's stuff to start out with. We didn't really have a chance to talk about the Mallory Pugh stuff this week. It sort of got lost a little bit in our shuffle. But of course, the young phenom that was scheduled to play for UCLA has decided that she is going to turn pro. It hasn't really completely come out where she's going to go, but there's some suggestion that Portland, the Thorns, might be the destination. There's also been suggestion that somewhere in Europe, perhaps PSG, would be the destination as well. So
I
that's
think it's
something
interesting in the fact that it's one of the first big cases of a young player choosing not to go to the NCAA route, but choosing the academy, go turn pro and learn your trade right away. And we've talked about this before where, yes, we're not saying education is not good. No, we totally understand and truly understand, like agree that the value of a scholarship, the value of education is amazing. But if you just want to play soccer, if soccer is your be all end all, and you want to go all in your professional career, you want to put all your basket in that professional career pathway, there should be a place for it. There should have a way to get the proper training, get the proper environment. And maybe that's the first instances, men or women, of an American choosing to go the professional route before the NCAA.
Yeah, no, you've seen a little bit more, on the men's side of things, obviously. But there's an interesting juxtaposition with Pugh and the UCLA connection with Jessie Fleming as well. Jessie Fleming, of course, arguably these are two, if not the best two teenagers, female teenagers playing the game in the world right now. And that's shocking for me to say as a Canadian, to talk about a Canadian, but I think the argument's there. Certainly, Jessie Fleming's freshman season for UCLA showed that she is at a different level than most of her peers at that level. But we don't hear any talk of her wanting to move on because she values that scholarship. It's a PN program, engineering program she's taking, which obviously is a very good degree to have.
Yeah, but she sees it differently too. She's from Canada and she sees the dollar signs of how this education would have cost her in American dollars. She's like, yeah, I'll take it. I'll take it for now.
Yeah, well, precisely. And look, it speaks to the idea that on the men's side of the game, if you have an opportunity to go to PSG or Barcelona or someplace like that, you're not even going to think twice about an engineering degree. I mean, if you could always go back when you're done, if you really want to do it for your self-improvement reasons, but you're going to be richer beyond your wildest dreams by playing for those clubs. But on the women's side, no. You're going to be making a middle-class living, and for a short duration of time with only by the time you're 35, you're done. So you have to figure out what you're going to do for the rest of your life. So there's those decisions still to be made. Women's football is getting better, I think, on the financial side, but it's getting better in a pace that's very slow, and that's why you still see a player like Jessie Fleming who looks like she'll do the full 4 years at UCLA and probably be bored of the soccer that she plays at the end of it. And unfortunately for Canadian fans, that might mean that she might not develop to her full extent, and that's unfortunate from a football perspective. But I'm hesitate to criticize her at all for the decision to stay at UCLA and to get an engineering degree, because that's obviously something that's impressive onto its own, forgetting any aspect of the sport part of it. But I don't know. I asked Jonathan too, and maybe we'll flip after this one. But I asked Jonathan where he thought the best league in the world would be in 10 years, and he said he hoped it would be the NWSL still. I don't really have a horse in the race in this one particular, whether it's NWSL or not. I mean, maybe the NWSL comes to Canada eventually, and maybe we might feel more ownership over it at that point. But I tend to think, based on stuff like this, based on the rumors of Pugh going to PSG, based on the amount of players, Carly Lloyd playing at City and sort of revitalizing that, Alex Morgan played in the semifinal, as we just said. I think I have a hunch that Europe is where this is going to go, and that you will see clubs like Barcelona, like PSG, like, Manchester City that we're seeing right now. We'll start to see them spending enough money that it's going to start to make sense for these women to move across the pond and play there full time. And that is going to be when the big shift happens in the women's game, Kevin.
I agree, but it's interesting to see one case happen in front of our eyes, and we'll either she wants it or not, she is now will be looked upon as either a pioneer or somebody who made a bad decision, and we'll track her development to see how it would have maybe panned out in the NCAA, or how quickly she gets better and how quickly she maybe raises to her Carly Lloyd level quicker than anticipated because of that decision too. So there's a lot of positive football reasoning behind that decision to go to the professional route right away. But it is an interesting case to keep an eye on to see how, because it's hard to have a case where we actually see the decision process and like, okay, they decided to go to professional route. Now we'll see an quick improvement on her play, because when you take that kind of decision, then you implicate the discipline and everything you need to 10,000 repetition and all those jazz into your play motivation, and you get to a bigger, higher level. And I can't wait to see that unfolds and just how high of a level she can reach with that decision she took.
Yeah, precisely. All right. We mentioned it before. The UEFA Women's Champions League semifinals do go this weekend. I had a guest booked for this. Actually, unfortunately, he had a family issue and had to cancel, but we're going to try and get him back for next week to review these things, because I think at the semifinal stage, especially, it's kind of important to try and provide a little coverage of that. It is a competition that's increasingly becoming more watched and more exciting. Lyon is playing Manchester City. Manchester City being the sort of new team in this mix. Lyon is a team that's been around and been very successful in the women's game forever. It's probably the most successful women's club team in the world, arguably. So that will be a heavy favorite for the French side there. And PSG Barcelona, again, Barcelona beginning to emerge. First time that a Spanish, that a La Liga side has emerged into the UEFA semifinals in this stage. So the two French sides will be the favorites. France has always been sort of the epicenter of the women's club game over the last few years. So we'll see if that continues to play out right now. The Bundesliga is also very good on the women's side, but and as Jonathan said, England is starting to catch up a little bit. I find it interesting on a couple levels. If you look at in the past, if you looked at the UEFA Women's Champions League, you saw like Scandinavian teams win. You've seen teams that are not anywhere close to the top of the men's game emerge and sort of establish themselves as being a women's power. But now, as the game evolves, let's look at the four teams in there.
True.
I mean, three of them.
I was just going to say before, though, if you're looking at England example, there is some teams, Forest and others, that are using the women's side to bigger their brand because they're trying to make it to the Premier League, but it takes a long while. But with their women's team, they can have a team in the first division and continue to grow that brand. So there is some aspect. And then there's a Notts County who folds 2 days before the beginning of their season, which is a shame. And we have to maybe take a hard look at the decision behind Notts County to fold their women's side just a few days before the beginning of their season.
Yeah, I know it speaks to a couple things. Like there's been a massive increase in the money that's being invested in the women's game in England, and that is good for the women, particularly the players, because some of that's trickling down to them. But it's also makes clubs like Notts County, which were traditional women's teams forever. Bristol City is another one that's kind of smaller on the men's side that does very well on the women's side. Makes it harder for them. So, you can argue that maybe that's hurting it a little bit, but it's difficult for me to wrap my head, especially, since I have a personal bias in the fact that it's Manchester City that has invested a lot of this money into the women's game on the women's side, which is something I'm proud of that club for doing. But yeah, there is a trickle-down effect with other clubs. But we'll see what we can do about watching those games. I don't know if I'm going to be able to, because it's going to involve dragging around some places on the internet that sometimes have a lot of pop-ups. Yeah. So we'll see. But if we can, we'll certainly give an effort to watch, particularly the City game. I will, and we'll go from there. Kevin, Zlatan. That was not pretty to look.
No, you can't. Your knee doesn't bend that way. And now maybe 6 months out for Zlatan, the knee blown. And was it the last time we saw Zlatan in a Manchester United uniform? It's that type of injury at his age. And yes, he's usually open saying, look, age is just a number. It's how you feel. Yes, but age is an important number when it's how you heal. And that will be very important for Zlatan. How does he recuperate from this injury? What does it say for his Premier League career? What does it say for his MLS maybe involvement in the future, looking at ULA? And that will be very, very difficult to overcome at his age. Yes, you can still play, but your body heals differently when on that side of 30.
Yeah, look, it's going to have some direct impacts for this season as well. I mean, this is a club, Manchester United, that is now in the Europa League semifinals. So they have at least one more huge game in that competition left. They still have a Manchester derby to play, which is obviously very important to them. They are chasing fourth place. And if you flash into Zlatan and look at the Galaxy and the possibility of him coming over to be sort of a rescue for them in the middle of the season, that seems off the cards as well, right? Or off the plate right now as well. So that's a lot of things happen. A lot of things changed very quickly in the time it took for him to jump to land, right? And that's unfortunate and
it's always like this, right? It's when you get injured, usually it's a fluke injury. It's not when you're trying to do the spectacular curler out of balance and you hit it, you'll be fine. It's when you're trying to do the stupidest movement that you don't even think twice about it, and that's how you injure yourself. I never sprain my ankle when I'm running full clip trying to catch the bus. No, I roll my ankle going out of bed because there was a sock I didn't see that I slipped on, and then you look like a fool limping just coming out of bed, right? So it's always on a weird, stupid fluke aspect that you get injured, especially the worst injuries.
Yeah, precisely. Walking home from the pub. Maybe that has some other things going on.
Yeah,
there too.
maybe
No,
if you don't walk straight and there's a pole in your way, I don't blame the pole, right?
yeah, exactly. The pole should have moved. You should have picked you're looking at 3 different poles. You picked the wrong pole to run into. All right. The last thing I had on the agenda today is the red card. The Montreal Impact fans must feel that Disco hates them at this point. So just expand on that, Kevin.
Because remember Marco Donadel red card 2 weeks ago. By the way, happy birthday, Marco Donadel. It's his birthday today. So I don't know how to say it in Italian, so I'll say bonne fête in French. So Marco Donadel's yellow red card, a phantom elbow to the face and throat of Jermaine Jones that actually didn't really happen, and got that red card in LA. It wasn't rescinded. Everybody, like you and I, were sure it was a guaranteed decision by the independent panel to overturn.
There,
But then I realized, and I look at the panel. The panel is made of many MLS team and player representative, one from Canada, and referees. So of course the one vote is not going to overshadow the rest, right? And it was a Galaxy, so it's different. This time around, Atlanta felt they got hard done. You have 2 unsuccessful appeals, so you can twice during the season make an appeal, and if it's unsuccessful, you only have 1 left, and then you're done. This one was successful. The Gonzalez Perez red card has been rescinded. He will be available for their game against RSL on Saturday night. And, at least Montreal still got the result of that game. So I have to agree with the decision, but you have to be coherent, though. If you rescind that one, just about 2 from the weeks prior, you should have rescinded. And that's where it becomes a question of, look, 2 very similar situation where a red card wasn't warranted and a red card was not, like, even a yellow was not warranted in the Donadel case, but I guess they didn't see conclusive evidence or evidence that could convince the entire panel. I don't know how that went down, but if you're going to rescind this one, I still feel bad for Donadel missing a game against Atlanta, which unfortunately it turned well for Montreal. They got the W, but it could have cost Montreal points because of that suspension to Marco Donadel. So yes, disciplinary committee and the independent panel, it needs to be a little bit more transparent to see how does the decision is taken. How is it taken? How do you take the decision to rescind it or not, a red card? And that needs to maybe be a little more transparent, because in 2 very similar situations, we have 2 different results, and that is not easy for the players and for everybody to have a consistent line of conduct when on the other side, it's not consistent.
Well, video replay is coming whether I want it or not after the All-Star game, and I'm on record as saying I don't really like video replay in any sport, let alone a sport that relies upon fluidity like soccer does. But nonetheless, it's coming, so that maybe will at least take away some of this controversy here. Although I will say this as my final thoughts on the week, the Donadel decision was ridiculous, and I say that as not an Impact fan. So there you go, folks. All right,
everybody outside of
whoever
MLS Soccer's bubble and that room agreed. But I guess we're not part of that panel. We might be independent, but we're not a third party.
All right, Kevin. Thank you, Grant, again. I'll let you, as always, say goodbye.
Stay tuned to the Sports Podcasting Network. Sunday night, the return of the MLS post-game show after an Easter break. And stay tuned for Off the Woodworks late tomorrow night after the Montreal Impact Philadelphia game tomorrow. You can follow Duane on Twitter at 24th Minute and myself at Kev Laramee. Thanks to Jonathan Tannenwald, our guest today. You can follow Jonathan's soccer thoughts on Twitter as well at The Goalkeeper. Until Monday, 10 a.m. for another edition of Soccer Today. Well, have a great weekend and have a great soccer. FA Cup. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.